There were 5,000 people at the Contact in the Desert conference. All these people that I encountered were thoroughly deceived.
We've had beings coming to the earth for like 650 million years old that have been here and crushed trilobites with boots and things like that. It's all in the ancient archaeology if you look for it. The Strong's Forbidden Archaeology have a lot of this covered in Australia, where the first landings happened. So they have it's all written in stone there, and it talks about the first landings, the DNA transfer to the Denisovian man. We all have Aboriginal genes, all of us do, and because we're all remnants of that, along with starseed genes and things like that. So Atlantis and Lemuria were Palladian colonies, and just as you're saying, it's in the Bible, it talks about that. The other star nations joined in. So, the bottom line is, if you know our real history, you know that we are the ETs. We're the genetics, not just human genetics, but plant and animal genetics from terraforming is the real history of the Earth. And many colonies have started and they've come and go due to natural disasters. So we have the genes of the gods. And if you want to know why they're abducting people, it's because we have the genes of the gods and they're trying to get those genes. So we're a big combination. We're a big genetic soup down here of human, animal, and plant genetics from the stars, the star nations. And we need to understand that it's not so far away. It's not so weird. It's not so different. It's us. And if you look all around you, all the species and plants and animals here, and the difference in humans and everything else, that's because there's this big genetic soup down here. And it's a biological masterpiece, basically, and it needs to be preserved. So it's so important, we go like this, we want to connect with Source, but we go like this because we've had these bad encounters with the bearded gods, and some were loving and benevolent, and some were malevolent, some were jealous, wrathful, genocidal maniacs. And we have these weird images in our head that have blocked us from making our own personal connection. But we really need to understand our real history so we can heal that, release that, and understand what's really happened in the past. And these beings, I asked the Palladians once, I said, do you look at us like monkeys down here or what? And they said, no, you're the bravest of angels. You're doing the work down here. You're walking through the slush and the muck and the mire. And they said, some of you, if we tried to do that, it would kill us. They're in awe of what we're dealing with down here. So we need to stop beating ourselves up and stop putting ourselves down and things like that, and realize that we all have that point within inside of us, that whatever you want to call it, that 0 point. Your soul sits right here next to the heart. It's connected to the source, and your multidimensional beings existing on a vibrational continuum. And we need to transcend this. We need to transcend this meat suit experience, because we're far beyond that. And that's the message they keep giving us. Don't identify with your culture, your body, any of this stuff. You're beyond that. There's so much more to you than you can imagine. We're vast beings, and we need to reconnect with that vastness. And when you start on that journey, they will find you. You're going to send out an energy signature, a light. And if you stay on that journey, they're like cosmic cheerleaders, and they're going to support you all the way. But we have to initiate it. We have to do the work. And it's a lot of personal responsibility, and it's all about staying in your center, and it's about self-empowerment. And remember, you all have your own unique purpose for being here. So I always tell people, I'm not your guru. If you follow me, you're lost, because I have my own purpose. And we're all unique. We have these awesome gifts and these awesome abilities, and we're all in this together. So if we start coming together and supporting each other. One more thing I want to add in ufology, and I've gotten in trouble for saying this, but none of us have the whole picture. We don't. It's all the above. It's everything. It's like government. It's old Nazi technology. It's back engineering, and, the ARV, alien reproduction vehicles. That's a government craft. No, it came from alien technology. It's time travel. It's multidimensional. It's all happening. And if we try to pigeonhole this and everybody tries to take control of it and say this is the truth or this is it, I would remind them that truth is much bigger than any of us can hold. You know, we can't capsulize this multidimensional universe, and even in our own minds. But if we all work together, if all the ufologists work together and put all their evidence on the table, then you'll get the big picture. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to come together as a community, put all the information on the table, and then we're going to understand how vast this enigma is. And until that happens, it's all going to be scattered and fractured, and it's going to be a lot of competition and other things going on. So that's been my thing all along. I've worked very hard at trying to unite the community. We've given them all of our evidence, undeniable evidence. Take it, use it, just don't twist it, make it positive. That's what we've been saying all along. So anyway, that's all I have to say. And it really gets back to, you know, it's up to us, all of us. You know, you're the disclosure, basically, and you're doing it.
There's a lot of talk about disclosure, big D versus little d disclosure. What is little d disclosure? Well, little d disclosure is what we just had right before this conference. Right before I went out there for this conference this past weekend, what did we see in the mainstream news? Oh, you know, the Pentagon and the government, the military is finally acknowledging that, you know, lots of UFOs we've been tracking, and, you know, there's stuff, you know, we're not alone, you know.
Yeah, it's like a soft disclosure, right?
It was a very soft disclosure, but we've had this for, you know, whether the government was finally admitting it or not. Joe Blow, who looks into this, has recognized this has been going on for a long time. The Phoenix Lights probably being the most prominent back in the 90s, and also in Stephenville, Texas. What was that? 2008, I think it was 2008. A mile-wide spaceship parked over Stephenville, Texas. Lots of people saw it, but the Phoenix Lights, I mean, a lot of people saw it. And one of the ladies that was there, she was a psychiatrist, and she was talking about how they had a profound psychological effect on her seeing them. And as she started to kind of take stock of what it did to her, she thought, well, this is my profession, analyzing people, you know, their psychology, right? So how did it affect the lives of other people? So she started doing like a 20-year study on people who were there, who witnessed it. I mean, in some cases, these were 1 to 8 mile wide ships that lots of people saw. Okay, wrap your mind around that. 1 to 8 mile wide. And one of the people that came out as a result of this stuff becoming more and more, you know, people coming out of the closet, so to speak, Kurt Russell, the actor, apparently was flying. I guess he owns a jet or a single engine Cessna or something. He was flying a private plane, and he was one of the guys that called in to air traffic control saying, what is this in front of me? You know, and he finally, I guess, apparently came out to, you know, talk about that.
I think that disclosure is going to come, but the biggest disclosure is between all of us. And I'll give a quick anecdotal illustration. Last night on Fade to Black, Dr. Lynn was up there. It was so wonderful listening to her talking about the Phoenix Lights. And she's talking about Kurt Russell, and he was flying, and oh, it was so incredible. And I said, Doc, the lady sitting right there in front of you, my assistant, that's Kurt Russell's pilot. She trained him as a pilot. I mean, I said, we're going to put you together. It's going to happen. I mean, it's just, we have to network with each other. Nobody's got it all. And if we don't share and knock off the ego thing and all that, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to get anywhere. I just want to thank you for, I've never, after meeting some of you people, I've never met so many informed people in a crowd. Now, I just ask one thing. Please don't embarrass me by asking questions that I can't answer. Dr. Lynn.
Hi, thank you, Darrell. It's amazing how, first of all, that I'm even here, and I'm so honored to be in the company of all you wonderful people, because I know that many of you have had similar experiences to myself as a medical doctor, and having a very close sighting to our home 2 years before. Thousands of people saw what I had been seeing and documenting on film. I have the only 35 millimeter photographs that have been analyzed and authenticated by military and university optical physicists and experts. And as the story unfolded, and talk about serendipities, someone told me there was someone else from Phoenix that saw the Phoenix Lights, but she didn't know where she was. And this morning I asked this wonderful lady to take pictures, and she's sitting right there. I mean, talk about serendipities. It's unbelievable how much we are connected. And once I knew, and I pushed my whole medical career aside after the mass sighting to try to find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed. I have yet to find it. If anything, it opened up a whole new world to me. I knew nothing about this topic, and it's mind-boggling how much has happened through our own history to bring us to this point of finally realizing that we are not alone. And a 750-page journal later, and not knowing what to do, because I did not want to come forward as a medical doctor, very precarious, particularly in the 90s. But how can you not share this data so that people can learn and grow if they choose? And the point is that it's time we get this topic out in the open, address it, accept it, and study it, so we can find out not only who's driving these things, but move forward in our own evolution, don't you think? I'm very honored to be with you now and sharing the data, and I hope you look at the Phoenix Lights Network website. It's packed with information. Anything that you've heard before about what happened over Arizona, out the window. So much mis and disinformation. That was another reason I had to come forward as a scientist, to let people see the science of it, as a physician, to let people know that they're not alone. They're not alone, and that they're not crazy. Even though most anomalies can be explained, only a small percentage cannot. But just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. So it's an honor to be with you and share the facts. The data speaks for itself, and I hope more and more people will look at those facts. And as mentioned by Darrell, it was amazing that I was in communication with air traffic controllers, because they saw the same thing that I was photographing over Class B restricted airspace, actually turning against the wind. The details are just mind-boggling, and they happened to mention, this was 22 years ago, that a private pilot called in to say, what the heck are these lights in front of me? Had no idea who that pilot was, even mentioned it in the book, in the first edition of the book. And here it turns out to be, 20 years later, finally coming forward, Kurt Russell. So there's a lot of people out there that have had experiences, and I'm sure many in this room, and the more credible people that come forward and share and talk about this topic and get it out in the open, which we're seeing now, the more credibility will lend to the topic itself. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you for letting me. It's so exciting to be on this panel of distinguished gentlemen and hearing them talk about the advanced technology and the dimensional possibilities and consciousness possibilities, because the Phoenix Lights anomalous aerial phenomena brings it all together. As I'm not a physicist, but I am a medical doctor with a background in psychiatry for adolescent medicine, and really considered the human part of this, which I'll get to. But first, let me describe, because I am an experiencer as well, up close and personal, as close as that wall back there, of 3 amber orbs in a pyramid formation 2 years before the mass sighting, when thousands of people happened to be outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet, when they saw incredible technology right above their heads, rooftop level. But here I'm looking at 3 orbs that seemed like there was an intelligence behind it. Not only was it something I'd never even imagined existed, I tried to take everything in mentally, and I really advise that for everyone. Take in mental moments of every detail. And I still have it in my mind, the size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each, depending on how close they were. And we live high on the mountain in Paradise Valley, overlooking the valley, and have a panoramic view of the city skyline, so we know what planes and helicopters and streetlights and car lights look like. These were totally different. These were orbs, and I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge. It was self-contained. And they were oval shaped, like an egg on its side, 3 distinct objects, very closely aligned, just hovering there in rock-solid formation. And the light inside each orb was a uniform amber color throughout, and it didn't glare at all. Every other light out there glared. These were mesmerizing, soothing light. And I thought, if I don't get my camera, nobody's going to believe this. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 millimeter, which is amazing that these are actually in the negative, cannot be denied or explained. My husband calls me back and says, one of them is disappearing, and we watched in awe as the top orb, and I always go back to this sighting, started to shrink very, very slowly, as if there was an intelligence behind it mechanically, getting smaller and smaller. It's difficult to even relate in human terms, like a dimmer switch, until it was the size of a pea and then gone from sight. But it still felt like it was still there. Where did it go? Where did it go? And when you listen to the technology that thousands saw on March 13th, 1997, again, just gliding right over their heads, not only these orbs that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what these things were attached to, and had either a force field in between, holding them in rock-solid formation, because it went over people's heads, rooftop level. Some people said it was so low that they could throw a rock at it. But it blocked out the stars from one, and we just learned a couple years ago from Peter Davenport, the head of the UFO Reporting Center, National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington. One of these objects was 8 miles wide. And it wasn't only orbs, lights. There were actual craft. And after a 12-year study of thousands of reports from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, Councilwoman, Phoenix Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who received over 1,000 reports, she didn't see it, but her constituents wanted to know why there wasn't an investigation and an explanation. That's a whole other story. There is so much to this story that people don't know. There's so much mis and disinformation. And also Village Labs, which was a computer lab that also received thousands of reports. There wasn't just one craft. 2 or more people had to see the same craft to be in the study. There were actually 9 or 10 different craft. And if you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website, which is packed with information, and go to the GAP page, Geospatial Animation Project, you will see illustrations and animations of these different craft. It's amazing how different they are. Now, whether it was one craft that could morph and look different, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or an actual parade, which ultimately, after 12 years of studying the data meticulously, was the conclusion, because it wasn't just 1 or 2 events, as you would hear in the media. It was many events happening at the same time in different areas, not only in Arizona, but in Nevada and California and New Mexico, for over a dozen hours of these technologies that we're just hearing from these Navy pilots, which is blowing me away because it's very similar. You're talking about these mile to 8 mile wide phenomena, rooftop level gliding at about 30 miles an hour, totally silent, no exhaust, no propulsion system that's visible. Suddenly they take off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. Other people saw one of these craft split in 2 and then shoot straight up. Other people saw these orbs go out into the environment and then redock with it later. The military tried to intercept one of these mile-wide crafts right over central Phoenix about 8:30 that night. And as they got closer, the lights dimmed, and as they were about a half mile out, it totally disappeared. Unbelievable technology that's 22 years later, we haven't seen anything that comes close to this technology. But as a physician, I was also intrigued by how it affected people at a very deep level. That's just as important, if not more important, than in technology. There has not been not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. I can't speak for other things, but I can for the Phoenix Lights phenomena. In over 22 years, it was quite the opposite. People were in awe. People were wondered, curious, felt excited. I'm still having people tell me that they felt blessed to have this experience. And not just an excitement, but till today, it is just amazing how it affected people at such a deep level that it changed their lives forever. That doesn't happen with blimps or balloons or flares. Now, not only that, but J. Allen Hynek made a very poignant statement. If any of you know, he was plucked out of Northwestern, the head of the astronomy there, to head the only public study of UFOs, which is Project Blue Book, and he admitted shortly before he passed in '85 that he was told that, anything that could be swept, that is real, to sweep under the carpet, and that could be unexplained. But most things can be explained. Let's be real. Most anomalies can be explained. And just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define these things, it doesn't mean they're not real. But he came up with the swamp gas, and he came up with actually the close encounter phrase. But he also came up with this statement, which is really poignant. Science happens in threes. The first stage is complete disbelief. The second stage is, well, it might be so. And the third and final stage is, I knew it all the time. For the Phoenix Lights witnesses, including myself, it's not a belief that this is real. It's a knowing that this is real, and a knowing that we are not alone.
What's happening now is back in the, going probably back to the 50s, maybe even the 40s. Let's go back to Roswell. From, let's say, Roswell through well into the late 90s, maybe to early 2000s, the experiences that people were describing were very much like Fire in the Sky. Did you see that movie, Fire in the Sky, the Travis?
Yeah, back in the 90s, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually met him. I got a picture with Travis Walton at the conference. I posted. I got pictures with Giorgio, the guy with the big hair from Ancient Aliens, and I didn't get
Aliens.
I talked briefly with Eric Von Daniken, but it's almost impossible to have conversations with these people. I mean, it's 5,000 people there. Everybody wants a selfie. It's, best you could do is, hi, how you doing? Whatever. Can I get a picture? One cool thing that happened, though, I don't know if you know Michael Tellinger, but he's another researcher who's got some really interesting things out there. And he was speaking on one of the panels, and I had literally just written in my notes, he's the only one of everybody that I've heard so far that may be close to getting it, like what's going on.
Do you think that it's just waves, like Linda says, that each wave is a beginning, or are we building and evolving based on the fossils and the remains and the artifacts you found?
It is becoming, like in quantum mechanics, it's been called a quantum zoo. This is becoming the archaeological zoo of just inexplicable historical stuff that just really scrambles the timelines. I feel like every time I come here every year, and I can see, looking at some of the people's faces here, the more we talk, the more they absorb, the more we share. Every year people come here with new knowledge, new research, and new information. We gain a lot of information, but we leave here knowing less, or feeling that we knew less than when we arrived here.
Well, that's good, yeah.
And that's just like, this never-ending quest, the more we learn, the less we feel that we know. That certainly is for me, and I'm sitting on the physical evidence of what I'm talking about, now that we've discovered these bloody fossils everywhere, literally mountains covered with body parts, and for those that attend my lectures, you'll see like there was butchery going on. There were legs of lamb and creatures and cows and reptilians that were being chopped off, beings and hearts and organs taken out, and these are all fossilized, lying scattered across the mountains. There's this and I'm not talking about one little hill. I'm talking about the entire subcontinent of southern Africa. This is not a small thing that's going on here. So whether things are... some of you may have heard of the Mandela effect. That's becoming quite an interesting subject to look into. Now, when I first came across it, I thought, it's just another distraction to take us off target. Well, the more you think about it, the more it's quite a possibility that we're constantly being lobotomized and restarted as a species, and this is just a stage. This world of ours is just a stage to play out various little episodes of stuff going on, and then it gets wiped clean, and another thing comes along, and another little play happens, and we're rediscovering the evidence of other plays that have happened before we got here. We got no relationship to it. We got no contact. We have no context into which to put it. It was just another play written by some other ancient Shakespearean entity. Who knows? The world is a stage,
And what's this? The world's a stage, and what's this body part doing here, right? Is that
Right.
But so you think we're wiped clean and civilization begins again from like ignorance and then builds up, and then you had something to say about that?
It begins again from us.
But don't we evolve? Isn't there a level of soul knowledge that is built upon those ancient civilizations? I'm just asking. I'm not saying I know, but...
At this stage, I got no bloody idea what's going on.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. Like 10 years ago, I thought I knew all. And the more I live, the more I learn, the more I just look up and marvel at how little we know.
Right.
Yeah.
And then right after that, he got jabbed by another speaker on stage he said, and oh, by the way, it is a sphere, Michael.
Do you find that's true? We have no idea what the ancients really intended by some of these megalithic structures, or do you understand what they intended?
Yeah, I know exactly what was going on. Only
A
me.
little bit.
No one else. These guys, nah, but... No, I've got inklings. I've got my research. There's many different aspects. The aspects I tend to look at myself, I'm very interested in what you see, the evidence that you can see with your eyes, the ancient technology, the sophistication of the stonework, but I'm more interested in the invisible aspects of these sites. These are the hidden astronomy, the alignments, the ley lines and the grids that connect them all up, the earth energies that connect them all up, and the way they used to manipulate the natural energies of the earth, the underground water, and cosmic energy into these sites, not only to raise consciousness, as JJ was mentioning, but also to enhance, simple practical things like fertility in the landscape, in the seeds and grains, in the animals, in the humans. And it's what my mentor, John Michel, called the enchantment of the landscape. And it was a global phenomenon. It wasn't just in England, it was all over the world. Where they would, according to John Michel and the traditions he was talking about, they would sing and they would chant non-stop forever, for thousands of years in different areas. And there was this constant frequency being sent around. And this created enchantment where everybody lived in this higher state of consciousness. It wasn't necessarily to do with sound. It was also to do with the placement of sites, working with the landscape like feng shui and geomancy, and also like understanding the nature of the planet and the energies that it contains, because this is a majorly energetic sphere we all live on. It is a sphere, Michael, by the way. Yeah. And
So that tells me that he's jabbed by other people on stage for possibly thinking that the Earth may be something other than a sphere, because there were a few little jabs like that. So I went up to him afterwards, and I said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your talk up there." And he's looking at me, he goes, "Do I know you? I think I know you." I said,
Yeah, you do.
I said, "Well, you may have seen me on YouTube or something." He goes, "Oh, Rob Skiba?" He goes, "I love your stuff, man." He's from South Africa. He's like, "I love your stuff, man." I'm like, "Wow, that's cool." I came there to tell him I enjoyed his stuff. And so that was kind of flattering. But, some of these guys I think are really close. because they're understanding that these aren't, they may not necessarily, they may not necessarily be otherworldly beings, but other dimensional spiritual entities. I mean, basically, if you throw out alien and replace it with angel, you throw out, the gods and replace it with Nephilim, and you throw out Gaia and replace it with Yahuwah, they're really close, and I posted that on Facebook. I'm like, just change the terms around a little bit, and everything that I heard there is fitting very nicely into a biblical framework.
Who were these people, you think, that built these ancient sites? Do you have any idea?
Well, there's what they're finding is if we look at Greece, we have these legends of the Titans who defeated by the Olympians, and these gods came in. We have these Pelasgian tribes. They're before the Etruscans, before the Romans. We also have the Shardana of Sardinia, but we have with Malta. We have dates that go so far back, and they found every single one of these areas. They found these giant bones and skeletons with very powerful jaws, very robust features. They weren't gigantism, didn't have acromegaly. These were powerful human beings. So I think this is opening up a whole new aspect of prehistory.
So go ahead, yeah.
Alan, part of the irony in all of this is we're talking about a hybrid that is described in the Christian Bible. And it is a hybrid between a human female and something, whether you want to call it Nephilim or an extraterrestrial, that the product was a six-fingered, six-toed giant species. When you think about that, that's archaeologically part of our major religious history, and yet it has been considered mythological, and now listening to what you all are talking about, it is as if we are finally, even if we're not going into outer space, we are discovering our alien roots through archaeology.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
I agree. And I think that's really important to emphasize that. Yeah.
And
it's ironic.
Also, the important thing is that almost all of the new discoveries are being made by independent researchers and not members of faculties of universities.
That's right.
We have finally taken over, and there's no way for them to stop us or to catch up to us.
That's right. That's why we need gatherings like this so the truth can get out there. This is why we're doing this.
Yeah, did you see that speech by Gordy Rose from the CEO of D-Wave, where he talks about
D-Wave,
the old ones. He called them the old ones, the Lovecraftian old ones.
Yeah,
he says, basically what they're doing is they're contacting and speaking to the Lovecraftian old ones like this. He's like, don't think of them, think of them like interdimensional beings. Basically, is what he was trying to explain it as. And literally, what all science continues to do, like it always has, is try and put ones and zeros and new nomenclature on something that's already manifested as spiritual or physical, and just change. If you describe in scientific terms the spiritual realm, you end up with interdimensional. And it's really just the same thing.
Yeah.
But it gives them control over the narrative, and gives them control over saying, hey, we understand this. This is something that's not from the Bible.